My name is Amanda Brief. I'm our Senior Event Marketing Manager here at Right Set Up, and I will be your pseudo moderator for today. And before we get started, I always just like to give a quick little regroup of who Right Side Up is. So we are a growth marketing organization. We deploy the best marketers across, individual consultants, part of custom agency teams, and then of course what we're going to quickly talk about today, full-time employment, full-time employees through our recruiting services, which Mark leads. So I'll let him do a quick bio in a second, but just wanted to give a very quick, brief description of Right Side Up. And of course, we always like to go through a couple of housekeeping items. So please note, all of you except myself and Mark are muted. So if you have any questions, throw them out in the Q&A box and we'll kind of address them in real time. However, if myself or Mark doesn't see it, we'll have time about like 5 to 10 minutes at the end to answer any additional questions. And then if you have any other comments or you want to pose questions for other people on the call right now, feel free to use the chat box because not only will we see it, but the other attendees will see it as well. So it allows for a little bit of engagement throughout this webinar. And then lastly, the question we always get, will this webinar be recorded? The answer is yes. We'll send out a link to the recording tomorrow afternoon. So if you want to rewatch it or share with any colleagues, you'll have the ability to do so. All right, with that, I am thrilled to introduce today's speaker, Marc Okeon, our GM of full-time recruitment here at Right Side Up. For those who don't know Mark, he is a seasoned marketing executive and retained search recruiter, specializing in placing top marketing, product, and data leaders at high-growth startups. And like I mentioned before, he is currently our GM of full-time recruitment, and he has about 20 plus years of experience spanning growth strategy, brand development, and talent acquisition. So feel free to read the rest of the bio, but I'll let Mark quickly introduce himself as we get started. Any other things you want to call out now, Mark?
No, I appreciate the intro. Thanks, Amanda.
Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and introduce the poll question. So in a second, you'll see a poll up on your screen. So the question is, how successful have you been in hiring the right talent within your desired time frame? So very successful, somewhat successful, neutral, you don't have an answer, somewhat unsuccessful, or very unsuccessful. And Mark, what do you think will be kind of the response? I know we're getting some coming in right now.
Yeah, I was thinking more like neutral, somewhat unsuccessful, but no one's unsuccessful. It's
It
just the
looks like
people that come to us
I
as
was,
clients that are unsuccessful.
yep, yeah, it looks like it's like about 40% are saying somewhat, as well as
Yeah.
neutral, and then 20% are saying very successful, whereas no one is saying they're somewhat or very unsuccessful, which is really great. That's kind of what we hope is the case. But I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and I'll quickly share the results so everyone can see. Cool.
That's
All
great.
right. With that, I'm going to hand it off to you, Mark, to kick off today's webinar. And like I said, I'll be behind the scenes, and I'll be back for our Q&A later. But enjoy, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks, Amanda. So yeah, we're gonna go over my framework today that we use here at Right Side Up for our FTE business, and this is how we hire. Obviously, we're partnering with clients, but I personally have used this when I've been in-house with marketing roles on my own team and colleagues' teams to kind of implement this framework really for two main KPI. One is to get the best talent on the market for the role. And two is to hire them fast, right? Because there's nobody that has, I should say nobody. It's very rare that people have all the time in the world to just like sit around and wait for the best talent to come their way or be placed. Typically with the clients that we're working with, or when I'm hiring for my own team, it's an acute need that we're trying to fill, and so time is of the essence. And so really those are two things that nobody wants to sacrifice when those are important, speed and quality. So I will tell you, this is a framework that did not come overnight. It actually came and was developed with bumps and bruises. Certainly, I got a lot of downloads. Recruiting as a function has been around for a very long time, so I was trained by some great people myself. But the refinement of this process came from failures, right? Like doing things the wrong way, having things happen to me or my team, and then baking that into the process for future roles that we execute to say, well, yeah, we're gonna build something in next time to avoid that happening or optimize it for next time. So anyway, that was kind of how our framework has really developed, and this is the process that we use today, ever evolving really, but this is the process that we use today with our clients that we partner with. So we think about recruiting as a funnel, which we'll show a little bit more of that towards the end. But I mean, we have a lot of marketers on the call today. I know we have some talent folks as well, but we treat recruiting like a funnel, just like marketers treat their inbound funnel like a funnel. And there's certainly volume that you can use to get more people through the funnel, and there's efficiency metrics that you can use and efficiency actions at every step of the funnel to make it more efficient. That also contributes to the volume. So as we think about the funnel, what we're going to do in this process is cover the objectives and the skills and how to define those, the pipeline build and how it's built, how to do outreach and selling, and the most effective ways and pitfalls to avoid there. Interview and assessing the things that I found that work, and then closing candidates, because that's a very important part. There's a lot of times when uh, things are done perfectly up until the point of closing, and then tragic losses of talent happens at the very end. So those are the things we'll cover today, and then we'll have some time, like Amanda said, at the end for Q&A. So next slide. I hear this a lot, that it's been tough, right? Sometimes when we have long-term partnerships with clients of ours, they come to us from day one. Other times, since full-time recruiting's been around for a little over a year here at Right Side Up, people are just now realizing that we do full-time recruiting. So we get people after they've had a pretty tough time, right? They've had the role open for a while. Um, and they're coming to us to help fix it, right? And we have it's not a guarantee, but our normal rate is somewhere between 4 and 8 weeks that we can place talent. So we're happy to pick it up when people come to us. But I would tell you that when I think about people whose full-time job it is to hire, um, it's always nice for those people to get an outside perspective, because if you're an internal recruiter, the way that you interact with your team is very different than someone like us who's an external recruiter interacts with your team. And I would just say that we have different ways to approach it. For the marketers on the call or the people who run a team today and hire for your own team, I always like to say this is not your day-to-day job. And you're probably awesome at your day-to-day job because you do it all the time, more frequently than I would do it. And I would just say hiring is one of those things that I and my team got really good at because we did it all the time. So anything that you're dealing with once a quarter, we're probably dealing with it several times a week. Just makes us uniquely positioned to be able to help. Next slide, please. So we think about defining top objectives and the skills. This is the order of operations, and it's extremely important because I do see a lot of people going out of order. This little this little meme is like extremely out of order, right? I don't hear this a lot where people are doing interviews to try to define the role, but I mean it has happened. But a lot of times, what people are doing is defining the title, defining the comp, um, and then going backwards and saying, what can I get for that? Which is a fine way to do it. I'll tell you, for the companies that we're working with and the roles that we're working with, really that's not the ideal way. We start with defining the top objectives and skills, and then we say, what are we going to be able to frame this role as to get these things done? And is it one role or is it multiple roles, right? Is it one senior role, multiple junior roles, those types of things? So next slide, Amanda, please. So I like to define the top three objectives. This is the most critical part of my process, I think. This gains alignment with us and the client amongst their team from step one. It's important to say three things, right? Like I think a lot of times people have a JD of the job description and it's got 12 things. All 12 of those things are not equally important. And they're also nice to haves versus must haves, and their skill sets versus objectives. So when I say identify three things that are objectives, it's box checking statements that this person is going to have achieved in 12 to 18 months to be successful. So the way you frame that and the way you state that to yourself is really important. But like I said, it's also really important to align that with your team and other stakeholders on the team, which is a theme you'll hear throughout this presentation, is that if you want to hire people fast, the way you one key way that you save time and not waste time is making sure that you're not making assumptions in a silo and you're involving people who are what I say have veto power downstream. You're involving those people up front and from the beginning. So if you've identified three things, and I have examples here that are very tactically worded from an actual role that we did, that you make sure you get buy-in from anybody that might have veto power downstream. And veto power doesn't mean your CEO, if your CEO has to interview everybody, unless your CEO has veto power, meaning the other five people or four people in the interview circuit thought this person was a thumbs up. Your CEO has the ability not just to give you feedback, but to say, I absolutely don't want this person and can tank that entire circuit, or it's a high likelihood. Then the CEO should be involved from the very beginning. Not every step, but at the beginning to at least get their buy-in to make sure that there's nothing in their head that you're not aware of. So anyway, that goes for quite a few things, but it certainly goes to the objectives because you'll see throughout this presentation, we come back to the objectives when we're making an interview guide. We come back to the objectives when we're defining quality. So the objectives are really important. And yeah, I have some examples here, right? Like the skills are more like things that this person brings to the table. Objectives are things this person is going to do. And there's some overlap, right? So in this one, there was implement advanced measuring methodologies to better measure attribution. Right, this client of ours wanted to make sure the candidate had experience with mixed media modeling. So you would see in the skills here that they have experience with mixed media modeling, but that's not the objectives. That's the skills that they come to the table with. Next slide, please. So define top objectives and skills. So the objectives that we had before, I said I would keep it to three. Sometimes with senior roles, we go to like four, maybe five. We usually like to keep it at three. I would say the skills part, we keep to about five. Again, you can kind of go crazy with all of the wish list that you have for a candidate. I would not go that deep. I think it's a good exercise for you and the team to do internally to top grade the skill sets that you think are most important. That dialogue actually is super helpful to get aligned because you'll find that your CFO, who's part of the interview circuit for this digital marketer, has very clear ideas about measurement, and it's a top skill that needs to be in there, whereas you may not think that. Again, the time you invest up front will save you and everybody else in that interview circuit. It'll save hours and hours and hours downstream. So top grade the skills and make sure you're including the ones that are the top five for this candidate, and both hard skills and soft skills. I usually separate those out. So in this example, top hard skills, things they have done, things they come to the table with. Um, it's important to be deliberate on what to omit. And that's kind of the top grading, right? Like if it doesn't fit in there, you should be very cognizant of what is not in there. And you can even verbalize that or make a note of it in your role doc and however you're organizing this. It's also really good to have nice haves versus must haves as you're grading candidates if you're a healthcare company and health tech. And it's a really nice to have, but it's not a mandatory thing that this candidate comes from a health tech environment. It helps you to understand quality as you're looking at those candidates, to understand that they have a lot of the must have boxes, but they also have a lot of the nice to have boxes checked. And then elements that I always include here are marketing channels and platforms, right? Like they need to be very strong in Meta. They need to have some exposure to paid search. They definitely need to have LinkedIn. If they have experience in podcasts, that's a great nice to have. Coding languages, right? Like if you have a BI system where it requires this person to know SQL, you should probably have that in there. And then management of a team, right? Especially if it's a person that's managing a large team, that's usually something we see here. Um, it's funny working with startups. The things that fall in our top soft skills is probably a 90% overlap across all the clients that we work with. So it's hands-on, ability to get in the weeds, player coach, high level of ownership, right? This one at the end here, ability to challenge a position confidently, the just startup world stuff, right? Like this is something you want someone to come to the table with. The only times we really see those vary from our core is when it's something that aligns with the company and the company's ethos, right? So empathy, there's some healthcare where if people have some alignment to what the services that the company offers, like those are also really nice things to have in the top skills section under the soft skills. Great. So level and compensation. So this is when you talk about level and comp. I mean, this is what I like to do. And typically if there is a mismatch when we're working with the client, this is when it comes out. Um, and I think, regardless is if you've done this exercise yourself or if you're a talent partner recruiting internally for a team, you've had this experience where you go through and you're like, you've defined the unicorn, the overlap of the Venn diagram is very narrow and small. And then it's like, yeah, we want to have this person be a very junior title, and we don't have a budget for it, right? And that's when these things need to align. And I'm not saying you have to up level everything from a title and comp perspective based on the objectives and the skills, but they should be aligned at this stage, right? Like you should say, oh, yeah, you know what? Given our wish list, this person is actually going to be a director and not a manager. Or if it's like this person has to be a manager and not a director, let's go back a step and start to whittle things down to make our objectives and our skills more realistic. But this is absolutely critical because if you get this wrong, this makes a role take months and months and months longer than it should because you are basically not aligned with the market, and you're not aligned with what you're going to attract as far as a candidate goes for what you're asking them to do internally. And the market part is really important here because you really need to understand what your competitive set is, right? Not only the competitive set of what candidates are comparing you against in the market, but to their current employee or an employer, right? So the chances are we're reaching out, we'll go over this and how to acquire talent. But if you're reaching out to passive people who are currently working, anything that is not their current company is inherently risky. You're asking them to make a move. It should be attractive to them, it should be attractive to them. Comp and level isn't the only way, but it's one of the ways that it is. And so these are the questions that I always ask myself, right? Like, how many years of experience will this candidate have to meet these requirements? Like today, what is their years of experience? Like, if we want them to have all these things under their belt, is that really going to come to fruition with someone with 4 to 5 years of experience, right? And also, what does the title need to be to attract the right talent? And what would their title be today? And certainly, obviously, we talk about title, company size will impact title leveling. That's just a given, right? Like at larger companies, people have lower titles, and that's something that people understand. And you can do that, we can obviously talk about that in messaging when we send outreach, but in general, you want the titling um, to really speak to people based on where they're at today. And I can't stress that how much time it wastes if this part gets incorrect. So yeah, posting the role on job boards and or LinkedIn for applications. So this is the best GIF I could find for a Black Friday swarm. I we have quite a few clients that come to us after they posted online. Um, Thinking that they were just going to have, 50 applicants that were amazing that they could thumb through and that it was quick to thumb through. And only to find out that within, I think one of the worst examples I heard was someone posted a role within, I think it was 48 hours. They had over 600 applicants for the role, which was just crazy. But yeah, as soon as you post something online, because of AI applicants and tools that the candidates are using, um, you get a flood. You just get an absolute flood. Part of what we would do for our clients, by the way, is go through applicants. So I've done that before. It is, as someone who spends a lot of time in LinkedIn, and folks on our team that spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, um, the most efficient people get through 70, 100 an hour. And that's looking and doing kind of pretty quick scrubs of profiles. And so it's very time consuming to go through and post online. So I would tell you that for the most part, we are not posting our roles online, at least not right away. Sometimes if we've had a role open for a while, we will, but um, I know friends of mine who are looking for jobs are not happy to hear that, and it's a pretty controversial topic on whether to post or not. But anyway, we typically don't. What we do is we source passive candidates, which you can talk about on the next slide. So yeah, I would say this is what yields the best quality for our pipelines. We are reaching out to people based on their fit for the role and trying to get them excited to throw their hat in the ring and talk to us. So we do this a couple of ways, and I think this is I mean, this is a honestly, this is a whole hour conversation in and of itself on how to do this properly, because this is a skill set. The sourcing part is a skill set in and of itself. Um, yeah, but yeah, we make a market map and do a market mapping exercise. And really what that is you think to yourself, what is the environment that will have produced the type of talent that I need? And when I say the type of environment, we're thinking of what company size, what vertical is this in, how many years of experience will this person typically have? Again, the current title that they have, and any keywords or skill sets that really inform the market map of that person. And when I say the type of environment, I mean we think about startups being hands-on, being in the weeds. Very, very common for our clients to tell us like we cannot have anybody from a large company, right? Like they've had poor experiences with someone who's come from a large company and only been at large companies, came from a big team with a lot of resources. They've come into our environment as a Series B startup and they haven't had a lot of success. They weren't able to get the plane off the ground. So those are the things that we would define. And then from there, we actually make company lists, and there's many ways to do this, but we're making lists of companies that have produced the type of talent, and people who have either worked at those companies in the past or they work there today will show up on our radar. And then it's going through profiles and sifting, right? It's actually the hard work of sourcing. And it's funny until you've actually done it or seen people who are really good do it. We have quite a few people on our team that are really, really good and efficient at it. You don't have an appreciation for how difficult it is. But even still, it's a lot more time efficient than sifting through applicants, in my opinion and in my experience. So yeah, that's pipeline building. So once you've defined the pipeline, right? So you've got objectives, you've got the skills, you're starting to fill the pipeline, then you're starting to get those people enticed to take a call with you. So I'd say there's a couple of things here that are really important to keep in mind. Um, One, use a pitch or info sheet. So I could tell you in my past, I used to make a pretty dense email or LinkedIn email where I would give a bunch of information. Um, some people like that and will ingest all the information. And some people will just see a block of text and they just delete or hopefully not mark me as spam, but that might happen too. I've actually migrated my thoughts to making what I call a pitch sheet, and it's been super, super effective for us in getting response rate. Even if someone's not interested, which is a fine response, right? We just want to make sure that we're getting answers from people in our pipeline. The pitch sheet has been extremely helpful. And I have an example here from MIDI Health, which is a client of ours, wonderful, wonderful client. This is page one. I think this ended up being like a 4-page pitch sheet. The job description is on the back half, but the first half is very salesy, right? And we're speaking in the candidate's language. So what we're trying to acquire here is a highly technical growth marketer, right? And so the language we're talking about here is total addressable market, who the financial backers are, what the growth trajectory is today, what the future growth trajectory is, right? A growth marketer is very excited and all those things. So that's the language that we're talking in. And then the call to action at the very end in both the email and in this doc is a Calendly link to just schedule on my calendar or whoever is running the role. So making it really easy to get on the calendar with you and a very low barrier to entry is super important. I will tell you more so lately, I've worked with clients and actually have heard stories about people who have gates up, um, mostly for their applicants on LinkedIn. And when you don't take those gates down for passive candidates, you create a real roadblock. So I'll give you an example. We have um, candidate who had a psychological assessment or some kind of assessment that needed to be done, and it was a screening mechanism for LinkedIn. So they were getting hundreds of applications every couple of days for this role, and so in order to screen the applicants out, they had the first step of their process was, hey, you have to go through this analysis, this survey, something to kind of screen you to make sure that you were a fit. Well, when we were reaching out and we were screening and we had already kind of got to this point in the funnel where we've, got a pretty refined set of candidates who have talked to us and we've graded and we feel like they're good, those folks were being asked just because the process is still in place to go through this assessment, and 0% did it. So we kind of figured it out really quick why that was happening because that gate wasn't needed for the passive candidates, but it was still up, right? It was just making it a little more difficult for people to apply when we're already asking these people to do, again, like I said at the beginning, to be more uncomfortable, right? We're saying, hey, we want to we want to talk to you and sell you on this role, and then we'll do the assessment, right? And anything that's a barrier there can be uh, can really impact the throughput of the funnel. But anyway, yeah, and I would just say like really selling first and assessing second is something that I always take into account when I'm doing outreach, but also when I'm doing my interviews. And when we get on interviews, we reiterate all the stuff in this pitch deck to get people super excited about the role, about the company, and about the opportunity. And then we're assessing, right? And then we're going into um, why we think they might be a good fit for the role. Oh, and on the last thing on this, I would just say, the last thing on this is like think about usually founders are really good at this, right? Founders are like, oh, I know exactly why everybody should work here. My company's amazing. But if you're not the founder, if you're a talent partner, if you're just leading marketing or recruiting for your team, think about yourself. Like, why did you start there? Right? This is usually a very easy thing for people to do. It's usually not that difficult. But yeah, I would just, refine the selling points of the company because it's a great opportunity and you just need to, sell that. So yes, the interview. This is definitely where top objectives come in. So honestly, I usually reiterate top objectives at the beginning of every interview, just to level set our candidate and let them know, right? Like we're not talking about your punctuality, unless punctuality is one of the objectives, right? Hopefully it's not. Um, I personally we have found it to be extremely inefficient when people are like, tell me about your background, like really unstructured questions like that, because it can go 100 different ways. I will tell you, there are definitely candidates where no matter what you ask them, their answer is, let me tell you about my background. And they do it anyway, which is actually frustrating and hilarious all at the same time. But I always start interviews off with like, hey, we're going to be talking today about your background and how it pertains to these three things that this company needs to accomplish in this role. And it's a really good level setting and efficient use of time, because then it's easy to steer the conversation back to those things, and it kind of helps them to do that as well. So we have our interview guides are all kind of split out between standard questions and functional questions. Standard questions are the same across every role, right? Like, why were you interested in having the call with me today? Right? Like that's really helpful when it comes time to negotiate to see like why, what's missing from their current role, or why were they interested, or maybe they're just super interested in this role. There's nothing missing from their current role. If those people progress down the funnel, it's very important to have that context, right? To understand like what's motivating them to have the call, their salary and their comp expectations, right? How it aligns. Is equity important to them, or are they more interested in base? the timing. Are you interviewing with anybody else at the moment? These are all important things to know right up front. And not right up front in the interview, just like in your relationship with them, to help you frame how you kind of interact with them through the rest of the process. Um, and then we have functional questions. And honestly, the functional questions come straight from the objectives, right? Like if you need this person to build an MMM and they need to measure upper funnel channel incrementality, then the question has something to do with that. I would avoid yes or no questions because when you ask a yes or no question, 90% of the time it will be in the affirmative. Or basically confirming what your bias is. So have you built MMMs before? Yes. Great. You have no context, right? Whereas a question that I would prefer to ask is, tell me about a time when you've built and implemented an MMM and you helped to supplement your channel mix for your marketing team by adding in upper funnel channels or demand stimulation channels or whatever it might be. So you're getting a little more context with that question than just a yes or no question. Um, the other thing to make this far more efficient is you divide and conquer across the interviews with your team. You don't need, if you've got 5 people who are interviewing, you don't need all 5 people to assess on the same things. It's pretty inefficient. Um, Everybody trusts each other and their ability to assess. You can double up on some things. Um, Culture is usually something that comes through with everybody, like you're going to get that. But for technical things, like you don't need someone to assess their Python capabilities across like 3 different interviews. It's not a good use of time. And I'll tell you this contributes to a fast hire because if you can do interviews in 30, 45 minutes versus an hour and a half, you can fit more interviews in and you're just far more efficient. So anyway, this just very much contributes to a fast close. And rubric and scorecard. We have some people who really like the rubric and scorecard and some people who don't. Um, it's the box checking activity that we talked about earlier. It's like skills and objectives, making sure that those things are covered. But being deliberate about those across the team doesn't hurt. It's nice to have. So yeah, these are some examples of functional questions that I pulled out. These are from actual interview guys that we've done, right? And actually, the example I use is right up at the top, right? Do you have experience with incrementality testing? Like, if I've asked candidates that before, um, it's very easy for them to say, yeah, next question. And by the way, that's a very efficient interview. If you're just asking yes or no questions, you get done with an interview extremely fast. You just have zero context. And it's not very helpful. Um, but anyway, yeah, we don't have to read through these, but these are examples of what I would do versus not do on the functional question side. Yeah, and so lastly is negotiation. And I mentioned this at the beginning. There's been really heartbreaking uh scenarios where someone has been nurtured all throughout the funnel, has been in process, talked to 5 different people on the team, done a take home case study, presented it, and something gets misconstrued in the negotiation part, and it is really sad. And honestly, like having a third party, involved is helpful. Just because candidates and clients feel like they can confide and kind of negotiate or broker through you. It doesn't have to be. Um, but yes, really people can misunderstand things very easily. And I think this is true with any relationship, right? Happens with friends, it happens with boyfriend, girlfriends. Um, so talking versus texting or email is almost always preferred when you're talking about things that are sensitive, like your comp or vacation needs or anything like that, right? I could tell you some of the things that come out here is I think that I don't know if this candidate is going to be a right fit because they have a vacation coming up and we don't typically take a week and a half vacation at this company. This is an extremely busy time for us because we're direct to consumer retail and it's Black Friday, where there might be context there, right? And that person had that vacation planned and booked, and all they're trying to do is make sure that that's covered. There's like a bunch of examples of when things go wrong because people misconstrue. They take the words that were in the email the wrong way. Like, what did they mean by that? Like, what are they trying to get at? So I always encourage people to just pick the phone up, have a discussion, or even better yet, you do it over video where you actually have, body language and you can see how excited the candidate is, and you can see how excited the company is to make the hire. So anyway, I would just say that's really, really important. And then going back to the interview, this is also why it's really important to get that context at the beginning, right? Like, what is important to the candidate when you're trying to make this offer? We talked about this before, right? Whether it's work-life balance, whether it's a base salary, equity, like why are you leaving your current role? Like why are you interested in having the call with me today? Right? Like this informs a lot of how you go to offer with your candidates. So this is our funnel with extremely small text. Um, yeah, and I can tell you like there's a little bit more than just what you do from a tactical perspective to make different stages of your funnel more efficient, meaning like you get more people to go from one stage of the funnel to the next. Um, some people have just a very compelling story. It's a very prominent brand that everybody knows. Like if you're recruiting for Spotify or OpenAI, like your response rate is naturally going to be extremely high, right? Other companies, you just have to do quite a bit to kind of stimulate the response rate, but there's ways to do it, right? Multiple outreaches. There's ways to stimulate that. There's ways to get those great people through your funnel in quantity. But honestly, on the sourcing side, even if you have a constrained funnel, adding volume at the top is always a really great way to make sure that you're getting quality candidates through, being cognizant of the fact that a market map only can produce so much good quality. So one of the analogies I use is real estate when we're talking to our clients when they want someone who meets all these criteria. I need someone who's in Chicago because they got to come to the office 3 days a week. They have to have experience with Meta. They have to be, aware of both TikTok and have done stuff on Reddit and blah blah blah. So all these criteria. With any kind of market map, you can't endlessly add people to the funnel, right? There's a finite amount of people in Chicago that have that criteria, and it's very much like real estate. So you're looking in a neighborhood and you want to spend, 500 grand on a house, it has to be 4 bedroom, 2.5 bath, and it has to be on a cul-de-sac. It's like, great, I can find you all of those houses, but some of them aren't for sale, right? And the analogy here would be some of them aren't interested in your job. And after a while, you've kind of, got answers from all those people. You've talked to all the homeowners and they don't want to sell. You can change your criteria up or down, right? You can go to 5 bedroom, you can go to 3 bedroom. You can make it not on a cul-de-sac, right? There's a couple of different things you could do to kind of open up your top of funnel. Or you can wait. That's the other thing that we can do is like if that's a very strict criteria and you need to have that, we can't make more houses be on the market. I can't make more candidates. But what we can do is wait and kind of rescour probably every week to see if there's any new people on the market that might fit that criteria and reach out. But that's not really contributing to a fast close. It's more on the side of erring on the side of quality and sacrificing time. So typically we don't have clients do that, but that's the funnel. So questions.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions coming in. So anyone else
Oh,
on
you
the
see them because I don't see questions.
maybe it's because I'm the host. But let's go ahead and start with the first one. I know comp is always a huge point of contention
Oh
for
yeah.
hires and for recruiters. So when do you typically bring up comp with the candidate and how?
Yes. So comp is typically posted and legally we put it, it's typically posted, it's legally has to be posted. And when people ask about it, I try to make it as open of a discussion as possible. So, and this is per our clients at least, people usually don't have a very hard number, but they have a budget. So this role is 130K, but we're willing to go over for the right talent. And so the way I word that with our candidates when they ask about that is I basically tell them, look, like there is a budget for the years of experience that they're looking for, but they're flexible depending on experience, meaning like if you have a ton and you're bringing a lot to the table, they're definitely willing to go over there. They're really trying to optimize for the right talent. We're trying to optimize for the right talent first and foremost. And then we can kind of talk, we can worry about comp secondarily. It's important to tell junior candidates that because junior candidates I've seen sometimes look for the number and they're like, yeah, 130, that's what I need. And it's like, well, you're on the very low end of years of experience in the range. So I typically try to coach them to say, look, if you're, they will pay 130 or, 150 or 200, whatever the comp range is. Um, but you have to have commensurate years of experience. And so typically I've found just being very upfront with them so they don't kind of shoot themselves in the foot is the right thing to do because it's really not, I mean, they're not doing themselves any favor. If they're coming with very low years of experience and kind of pegging themselves to the high end of the range of comp, it's a pretty easy no when we're reviewing a panel of great candidates that like, hey, the one that's less experienced and more expensive is probably not the best fit. So anyway, that's how I usually address it with them. But we like to leave it open because what I also don't want to do on my end as a third party recruiter is screen out great talent before my client has had a chance to weigh in. Because sometimes they will say, well, like, actually, no, that person checks so many boxes. And what you didn't know, Mark, is that we were going to hire this other person 3 months from now. And now knowing this, like, we could hire this person to like check all these boxes and we would gladly pay them, 10, 20% more. So anyway, but comp is always a touchy one. Yeah.
Of course. I just saw a question come in from Jess. How would you approach a hiring situation where you have two candidates? So one who's a good fit for the objectives, and then another who might be overqualified.
Yeah, I mean, that's always tough. I always like to say that I like to put our clients in tough positions where I'm like, I want you to be making hard decisions and having to choose between people after a month, right? But yeah, I mean, it all depends. I would say, what is the future need of your team or department that you're hiring for? If you are a rapid growth startup, um, I would say you should probably hire the person who is overqualified if you feel like there's things that they can grow into. If you hire somebody and they're going to be bumping up against the ceiling, either financially, title wise, or function wise, right? Like they're going to be bored. That's not fair to them, right? And you're just going to make them leave early. But I would say really that depends on the environment that you're creating for that person. Like, what are they going to be walking into? And I would also say the example that I just gave before is a really good one, right? Like I've talked to people who are like, an actual example is I need a performance marketer. Um, I've brought people who are more senior because they were just great. And I was like, look, I know this person's more senior, their scope is wider. And the client has told me, hey, even though they're overqualified, we actually had a data analyst that we're going to need to bring onto the team in the next couple months. I mean, we were going to have this person be a director level. But if this kind of performance marketer is here and kind of take some of that weight off, we could probably down level that person when we do hire them. So we can hire this person, pay them a little more, even though they're overqualified and broaden the scope. So maybe we call them like, a head of marketing and analytics or something instead of just a head of marketing. So those are things that I think are really defined by your environment and the situation that you're bringing that candidate into.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's maybe round it out with one more question. So how do you typically make a rubric? How granular do you usually get?
Um, yeah, as far as so there's certain clients that are extremely rigorous with the rubric. I would say this falls into the category of you don't want analysis paralysis. So first of all, you're talking about the number of elements in a rubric. Like I've seen it come into like the 20 to 30, and it's just a lot. It's really cumbersome to do interviews, right? Like if you have to fill out a form. It's like after every interview, it becomes for everybody that's involved, it becomes very cumbersome. Again, I am all about top grading skills and objectives and thinking are which ones are the most important must-haves, right? And I would say those are the elements that you include. Eight, maybe, right? You think about top three objectives, top five skills. But I mean, if you had five, I think that's actually much more manageable. And then from a granularity of a scale perspective, um, it's funny. Some companies that we work with, very regimented already, and they come to us with like, we have a scale from 1 to 10. And I was like, that's a very granular scale, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if you're really delineating between like a 7 and an 8. So I typically like to say, you know, what I've heard is I've heard it called like t-shirt size. You know what I mean? Like small, medium,
Yeah,
large, or like good, better, best, or like green, yellow, and red, right? Like I just think like those are things that are just very easy when we create those, especially after you've talked to 10, 15 candidates, right? Like so our pass rate typically is about 50%, which means if you're talking to 10 candidates, we typically talk to 20. And when you look at that visually on a rubric and you've got something like high, medium, low, it's very easy to just visually assess how the team feels about the candidates. So my grade is in there, hiring manager, their peers, their boss, and you can just look at it and say five things, good, better, best, like there's clear standouts. So anyway, that's what I would say. Like, don't make it too much work on yourself to fill out. Don't make it another analysis project to have to figure it out after the fact either.
absolutely. All right. I know we're almost at the top of the hour, so we're going to wrap up. But if you do have any additional questions for Mark, you can throw them in the chat now, or you can email him directly. His contact information is up on the screen. I'm sure, Mark, you're happy to get any questions or
Yeah, of
LinkedIn
course.
requests from anyone if you have any additional questions for him. So yeah, with that, we're going to wrap up today's webinar. Thank you to each of you for attending today. And of course, thank you, Mark, for sharing all your insights on how to hire smarter and faster. So with that, we're going to wrap up and look out for an email from us with a link to the recording tomorrow afternoon. Great. Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Have a good rest of
Thank
your
you.
day. Bye.